many other...
this is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to WION live broadcast from London. I'm Laura Makin and in the next 30 minutes we will get you updates on stories developing around the world. First, let's take a look at the top headlines. US President Joe Biden says Afghan interpreters who aided American troops during the 20-year-long war would not be abandoned when NATO troops leave the war-torn country. While US-led forces in Afghanistan continue to withdraw, President Ashraf Ghani will meet US President Joe Biden. Meanwhile, the Taliban continues to gain new ground. During talks between European Union leaders in Brussels, the bloc rejects a bid by Germany and France to restart meetings with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The second shocking discovery in less than a month in Canada reveals more than 750 unmarked graves near a former Catholic boarding school for Indigenous children in Western Canada. Rescue teams combed through the rubble of an oceanfront apartment block near Miami Beach that partially collapsed, killing at least one person and leaving at least 99 unaccounted for. And record 15-time champions Uruguay end a 5-game winless streak as a hard-fought 2-0 victory over Bolivia clinches a quarter-final berth at the Copa America. European Union leaders have rejected a proposal by France and Germany to restart talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Poland, which opposed the talks, said such a move would send the wrong message. This comes as ties between Moscow and Brussels worsen over a range of issues, including fresh escalation in Ukraine. Lithuania's president said there would be no meetings at the European Union leaders' level with Russia. Berlin and Paris had put forward a last-minute proposal for the bloc to resume meetings with Putin in the wake of US President Joe Biden's meeting with him in Geneva last week. Angela Merkel had earlier said that it was important for dialogue to continue.
We then discussed Russia. That was a very detailed and also not an easy discussion. And we once again defined our requirements, under which conditions we would want to closer communicate and cooperate with Russia. And formats are now being worked on. Formats and conditionalities under which a dialogue can be started. Today it was not possible to agree that we would meet immediately at leaders level, but what is important to me is that dialogue format is retained and that we are working on it. Personally, I would have wished for a bolder step here, but it's also good as it is, and we will continue to work on this.
French President Emmanuel Macron has pushed for the resumption of talks with Russia after the meeting between Russia's president and his US counterpart, Joe Biden. The bloc stopped holding a summit with Russia after the country annexed Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula in 2014. Europe imposed a series of sanctions on Russia following the annexation, including on Russian defence and energy sectors, as well as individuals and entities. Further curbs included asset freezes and travel restrictions. On Friday, the Kremlin said that it regretted the decision taken by EU leaders to reject Germany and France's proposal. A Kremlin spokesperson said that President Putin was and remains interested in establishing working relations between Moscow and Brussels.
Товарищ избранный президент Российской Федерации.
The dispute between the United Kingdom and Russia over alleged trespassing by a Royal Navy ship is continuing. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that the British warship was acting legally in international waters after a confrontation with the Russian military. Johnson said that Britain does not recognise Russia's claim over the Crimean Peninsula and that the warship had been sailing through Ukrainian waters.
I think it was wholly appropriate to use international waters and by the way, the important point is that we don't recognise the Russian annexation of Crimea. This is part of sovereign Ukrainian territory. It was entirely right that we should vindicate the law and pursue freedom of navigation in the way that we take the shortest route between 2 points, and that's what we did. I think it was very important for the Carrier Strike Group to do what they're going to do around the world in partnership with 40 other countries on manoeuvres, sticking up for our values, sticking up for what we believe in. That includes democracy, human rights, equalities, but also the rule of law and freedom of navigation. We don't recognise the Russian annexation of Crimea. It was illegal. These are Ukrainian waters, and it was entirely right to use them to go from A to B.
On Wednesday, the Russian Defence Ministry released footage of the incident. Russia claims one of its warships in the Black Sea fired warning shots and a jet dropped bombs in order to force a British destroyer out of the area near Crimea, which Moscow claims as its territorial waters. Britain, however, has denied Russia's accounts and insisted that its vessel, HMS Defender, was not fired upon, but it confirmed that the destroyer had sailed through what is described as Ukrainian waters. Britain's Ministry of Defence said that the ship was conducting an innocent passage through Ukrainian territorial waters in accordance with international law. Moscow hit back at London, accusing it of spreading misinformation over the confrontation in the Black Sea. Russia even warned Britain of responding resolutely to any further provocation by the British Navy. It is the first time since the Cold War that Moscow has acknowledged using live ammunition to deter a NATO warship. Moscow has accused Britain and the United States of trying to incite conflict in the Black Sea. Russia reiterated that it would defend its borders by all possible means, including military force. Moscow had also summoned the British ambassador to Russia over the incident. Russia annexed the Crimea Peninsula from Ukraine in 2014. It considers areas around its coast to be part of Russian waters. The West, however, deem Crimea to be a part of Ukraine and reject Moscow's claim to the seas around it. The jailed husband of Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, Sergei Tikhanovsky, has been put on trial by the Lukashenko government. Tikhanovsky was a popular YouTuber before he challenged Lukashenko's decades-long rule. He quickly emerged as the face of opposition before promptly being arrested for quote-unquote violating public order. Independent rights groups say Tikhanovsky stood for trial in Gomel city. The hearing was held behind closed doors inside a detention centre where Tikhanovsky has been held for over a year. He faces up to 15 years in jail. 5 other activists are also on trial, including historic opposition figure Mykoloki Statkevich, his wife Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, who was formerly a political novice, took his place and quickly gained popularity. She went to become Lukashenko's main challenger and is currently in exile in Lithuania. She has called this trial a sham driven by personal revenge.
9 мая 2020 года Моего мужа Сергея Тихановского задержали прямо на пикете по сбору подписей. С тех пор жизнь нашей семьи, как и тысяч семей белорусов, очень изменилась. Ведь все понимают, что это не суды, а персональная месть и расправа от того, кто захватил и удерживает власть при помощи насилия.
Alexander Lukashenko so far enjoys support from Russia. The West, however, has on a number of occasions denounced his response to opposition-led protests that saw hundreds of people arrested or jailed. Europe and the United States have placed numerous sanctions on Lukashenko's government, with the latest being announced earlier this week over the forced landing of a Ryanair flight to arrest a regime critic. Within days of taking over as the Israeli Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett has been warning the West about Iran and its new president, Ibrahim Raisi. Bennett's warning comes as world leaders seek resumption of compliance on the 2015 nuclear deal, which Israel has been strongly opposing. Bennett says the global powers cannot do business with the Iranian regime anymore. Our next report gets you the details.
A change of guards in both Israel and Iran has not changed the status quo between the two West Asian powers. Just a few days ago, Israel's newly sworn-in Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, warned the West over Raisi's appointment. And after his first warning comes the second one. Slamming the Iranian regime once again, Bennett said the world needs to understand that global powers cannot do business with the Iranian regime. Addressing a graduation ceremony of Israeli Air Force pilots, Bennett once again described the new Iranian leadership as a violent and a fanatic regime, which elected the so-called hangman of Tehran as president.
We would prefer it if the world would understand that such a violent and fanatic regime, which elected as president the hangman from Tehran, which is willing to starve its people over the years in order to reach a military nuclear program, is a regime you can't do business with. Unfortunately, this is not the case. We will continue to consult with our friends, convince, discuss, share information and insights out of deep mutual respect. But in the end, we will keep the responsibility for our fate in our hands and not in the hands of anyone else. We will act responsibly and seriously, and we will keep the huge deposit placed in our hands.
Bennett has been relentlessly campaigning against Iranian President Raisi's regime. Earlier, he even asked world powers to wake up to the perils of returning to a nuclear agreement with Tehran. The Jewish state is against reinstating the Iran nuclear deal. It says that Iran will use the pact to develop nuclear arms. For weeks, Iranian and American diplomats, along with European leaders, had been negotiating to resume compliance on the 2015 nuclear deal. The talks, however, were adjourned on June 20th. 2 days after hardliner Raisi's election as president, on Thursday, a senior US official said that Washington may need to rethink its approach if serious differences between the US and Iran cannot be resolved in the foreseeable future. So far, Biden has been pursuing a balanced approach on Iran. Naftali Bennett has pledged to work together with the United States on matters related to Iran. Bennett's government has said that it is looking forward to repair relations with the Democrats. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden is all set to host Israeli President Reuven Rivlin on June 28th. The White House in a statement has said that President Rivlin's visit will highlight the enduring partnership between the US and Israel and the deep ties between the two governments and people. Rivlin's US visit comes as he nears the end of his 7-year term as president. Bureau Report, WION The World is One.
With flaming torches and green laser beams, night disruption protests were held in south of Nablus in West Bank, where Palestinians are waging a battle to stop a new Jewish settlement. The growth of a settler outpost in Nablus began in early May and is now home to 53 Israeli families. Palestinians say the land belongs to them. Take a look at this report.
Green laser beams and flaming torches light up the night sky. punctuated by the chants of angry Palestinians. They are waging a battle to stop a new Jewish settlement in a remote part of the Israeli-occupied West Bank. These night disruption protests south of Nablus aim to halt the rapid growth of a settler outpost called Givat Eviatar that began in early May. During demonstrations that began last week, burning tyres have engulfed settler homes in acrid smoke. The Palestinians come with a clear message for the 53 Israeli families that live here. This is our land, not yours.
We are the night disrupting unit. Our aim is to dismantle the settlement now during the day. The unit for tires is usually situated in the other area, and at night we come and burn tires here, like you see, to send the settlers a message that they don't own any of this land. This is our 5th time here, not the first time. We've evicted them 4 times, and this is the 5th, and soon we'll push them into the trash bin of history.
The Israeli military says it faced hundreds of Palestinians threatening its troops. Palestinian officials say Israeli troops have shot dead 5 Palestinians during stone-throwing protests since the settlement was set up. Givat Eviatar resident Eli Shapira says the settlers will not be intimidated.
They won't drive us away from here because, again, we know this is our homeland, this is our forefathers' land, and we know we love the land, we want to be here. We know they come out of hate. They hate us, they hate the land, they hate everything. Okay, it's fine, so if they want to hate, they won't stay here. They won't survive here. Anyone who comes out of hate, we come out of love.
Construction at Givat Eviatar is still ongoing. Families live there in caravans. Some roads are already paved, others are lined with electricity cables. The settlers named the outpost after Eviatar Borovsk, an Israeli stabbed to death in 2013 by a Palestinian at a nearby junction. It was set up without government authorization, which makes it illegal under Israeli law. That presents an early test for new Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, once a senior leader of the settler movement and the head of a far-right religious party, who now leads a coalition that spans both right and left.
While the Biden administration has maintained that the US will stick to its September the 11th deadline to withdraw all its troops from Afghanistan, reports say in the wake of rising Taliban violence there could be a shift in strategy. An Associated Press report says the United States could retain a few hundred troops. Take a look at our next report for details.
The United States withdrawal of forces from Afghanistan has emboldened the Islamist militant group, Taliban. The Taliban insurgents are conducting a wave of offensives, especially in the north, which is beyond the Taliban's traditional strongholds in the southern districts. On June 22nd, Taliban even captured Afghanistan's main border crossing with Tajikistan, the Sher Khan port. All this since the United States and NATO forces began withdrawing troops. The United States has maintained that it will not change its timeline of withdrawal of troops even as violence in the war-torn country rises. The White House said that U.S. troops will withdraw by September 11th.
First, I would say that our Department of Defense is overseeing an orderly withdrawal of our troops from Afghanistan and doing that at a pace that, in their view, will ensure their safety and ensure we are doing it in a way that's effective and in a coordinated manner with the government. I will say that while in general we are seeing elevated attacks on DSF and Afghan government versus a year ago, we have not seen an increase in attacks on our military presence since February 2020.
Former Afghanistan President Hamid Karzai blamed the United States for the situation in Afghanistan.
The heavy-handed, totally wrong US NATO military campaign in Afghanistan. The campaign was not against extremism or terrorism. The campaign was more against Afghan villages and homes. Putting Afghan people in prisons, creating prisons in our own country against our people, and bombing our villages. That was very wrong.
Ahead of Afghan President Ashraf Ghani's meet with US President Joe Biden, WION spoke to Afghanistan Security Council's head of international relations of the National Security Council, Ahmad Shuja, who sounded confident that Afghan forces are capable to handle and fight the Taliban.
The Afghan National and Defense Security Forces are completely capable of defending their land. They have the support of the people who are standing shoulder to shoulder to the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces. What we need is diplomatic and political support to deny the Taliban the propaganda victory that they so crave by traveling across the capitals of the region, by receiving heads of diplomatic services in Doha, but also receiving continued defense and security support from the United States across the horizon. And for that, we don't really need American boots on the ground, and we respect President Biden's decision to withdraw his forces.
But with the growing concern of Afghanistan getting into a civil war, the United States is likely to retain a certain number of troops on ground. An Associated Press report says that roughly 650 US troops are expected to remain in Afghanistan. They will be providing security for diplomats. In addition, several hundred additional American forces will remain at the Kabul airport to assist Turkish troops providing security. The big question is that without the US boots on the ground, can the Afghan troops stop the Taliban juggernaut? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Canada has published the results of its forensic investigation into the downing of a civilian airliner by Iran in 2020 that claimed the lives of 176 people. In some of its strongest comments on the incident, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau writes, and I quote, "The report demonstrates that Iran's official account of events is disingenuous, misleading and superficial and intentionally ignores key factors." Trudeau further says that among the options available before his government, he could also take Tehran to international court at The Hague. However, the Canadian Foreign Minister, Marc Garneau, pointed out that there were no indications whether Iran shooting down the airliner was a premeditated.
Does not get off the hook in any way whatsoever. It is totally of incompetence, lack of accountability, a total failure to properly assess the risk, a total failure to close the airspace, and not even bothering to inform the aircraft taking off that they were in a risk environment because missile batteries had been set up in the vicinity of the airport. So Iran is 100% accountable for what happened.
The report has three main findings, chiefly that Iran did not notify airlines of the risks of entering what had quickly become a conflict zone, thereby failing to ensure safety of its airspace. The report details how a surface-to-air missile operator made a series of flawed decisions and that Iran's military command and control protocol completely failed. Well, that's all we have time for on this edition of WION Live broadcast from London. I leave you with these breathtaking visuals of a strawberry moon glowing across the skies, making the fourth and last supermoon of 2021, which was also the first full moon of the summer solstice. Here are the visuals from Istanbul and Dubai. Take a look.
Many other. This is right, Arab.